What's the best example of survivorship bias? People who survive some sort of disaster, earthquake, terrorist attack, whatever, saying they had the will to survive. That's why they were able to make it out. I'm pretty sure that like 99% of the victims that didn't make it also had the will to survive, but the universe is random and shoved a metal beam through their chest. People say this crap with cancer, including having a positive attitude. I guess my dad didn't have the will to survive or a positive enough attitude when the pancreatic cancer metastasized through his body and killed him. Talk about blaming the victim. After steel helmets were introduced in World War I, the amount of head injuries increased sharply. When higher-ups were considering scrapping the helmets as a result, it was soon pointed out that these injuries would have been fatal if the men were still wearing cloth caps. Gen X are here. Grew up in the country. My Facebook feed is filled with "we didn't need no seatbelts as a kid and we used to ride in the back bed of the truck and we're fine. Frick those pansies." Yes, I rode in a car without seatbelts. Heck, most cars we rode in didn't have them. And yes, we rode in the back bed of the trucks, looking up over the cabs, going 60. And yes, I remember riding with adults that chugged Coors Light as they drove a truckload of hay and just didn't think it was odd. You know what? A lot of kids who did that crap died. That's why you're not going to get anyone arguing on Facebook. Yeah, I rode in the front as a kid without a seatbelt and I've got a scar on my face to show where I impaled my cheek on the instrument panel on the dashboard. I think asking old people how they live so long, you don't learn anything. Well, my kids slept on their stomachs and rode around in the front seat of the car with no seat belts, all before their first birthdays, and they were fine. Refusing to give your possessions when robbed at gunpoint. The people who this didn't work for aren't here to tell the tale. My grandma is a smoker and she lived to be 80. My mom is an active smoker. She turned 77 this year. My dad was an active smoker. He would have been 81 this year. He died at 52. I don't smoke. Cancer. Essentially, if nothing else gets you, cancer will. So for every disease you successfully treat or prevent, the greater the likelihood the person will die of cancer. As we cure more disease, the rate of cancer will go up. Smoking reduces incidence of Alzheimer's disease for the same reason. Abraham Wald and the missing bullet holes. In World War II, mathematicians were tasked with how to best armor planes. Since extra plating added weight, they wanted to use as little as possible by analyzing the bullet holes on planes that returned, and only to armor the places that get shot the most. Wald noticed that almost none of the planes that they looked at had bullet holes in the engine area, and realized that planes that get shot in the engine even once will be destroyed. Since they were only analyzing the planes that came back, nobody else had considered the planes that didn't make it back. So they just put extra armor around the engines and the planes were much more resilient. Similar thing happened when metal helmets were introduced for troops. During the First World War, head injuries went up. Previously a head shot had been fatal, so there were very few people with head injuries. Once the heads started getting some protection, soldiers shot in the head were more likely to survive, but with nasty injuries. Autism. Nobody had autism before vaccines. No, people with autism were labeled retarded and locked in the shed. My great uncle has autism. They called it infantile schizophrenia and gave him a lobotomy. I once got a jar of cherry flavored jelly beans from a friend as a congratulation gift. She was super thrilled about it and explained that she'd seen that I always have a little jar of cherry flavored jelly beans on my desk, so obviously they were my favorite. And wasn't she clever for figuring it out? I didn't have the heart to explain to her that the reason the jar had a buttload of cherry jelly beans in it isn't because I like them, but because I hate them and they're the only flavor out of the multipacks I buy that I won't eat. Everyone share this post if you rode in the bed of a truck and turned out fine. Everyone who didn't turn out fine is too dead to say so. Two of my cousins and I rode in the bed of my uncle's truck to the beach once when we were kids. It was about 30 miles from their house to the beach, almost the whole way by freeway. This was the early 90s. I can't imagine doing something that stupid and dangerous nowadays. Safety equipment. I'm a co-guy and a relatively new parent, 3-year and a newborn. The amount of older people who say, I was just fine without 20 airbags, or why is he still in a rear-facing car seat at 2.5, forget to add the part where they weren't in any car crashes, or at most low speed ones. Just because you made it through just fine doesn't mean that improvements aren't needed. Many relationship advice you get, especially on our relationships, that is purely anecdotal. Oh, don't worry honey, I married my so after just having dated 3 months and we are still going strong 8 years later. Just follow your heart. Like, okay, good for you, but generally speaking it's not a good idea to marry someone after 3 months, and you never see the countless stories of people that did that and ended up bad. I never believed in love at first sight until it happened to me. Turned out the guy was a totaler and I got my heart broken. Not entirely sure if this is the same, but the argument that older furniture, especially mid-century modern, was better than today's. I like the Mission style. It became popular in the early 1900s because it was handmade and was better quality than the mass-produced garbage that was becoming commonplace. This was over 100 years ago. We keep going through cycles of the same thing. Yet, but also let's say a properly built French commode from Versailles is more likely to be in better condition than the milking stool a country boy used every day. It ain't about the build quality. In college, when I was a junior in engineering, they brought in a couple people to tell us about their internships and how they got them. They talked for 10 minutes each on their experience, why they recommend it, etc. Yes, we know it's good to get an internship, the money, practical experience, resume booster, contacts, etc. Neither said a word about how they got it, which was kind of the point of going to it. So many of us, in 2008-2009, were having trouble finding internships, and so I was hoping to get some insight, an avenue I hadn't considered before, that kind of thing. Afterwards I ask, so, can you tell me about how you landed these? Career fair, applying online, that kind of thing? The girl, well, my uncle works at that plant, so, the guy, my dad knows a guy who worked there, and he recommended me. MFW. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We think it is so common today, and that it also used to be so common, but past people just didn't have any awareness of it. While lack of awareness in the past was one reason it is so much more prevalent today, another reason is that past traumatic things used to kill people much more often than they do today. Medical science has enabled so many people to survive horrible events. Now people have PTSD, whereas once they would have just come down with a bad case of dead. All the music from past decade is so much better than music nowadays. Well, yeah, because we don't remember the bad music from back then, because it was bad. We don't play it anymore. Only the good music from the past is still played today. However, bad new music is being experienced right now in the present, as it is being released. Time has not yet weeded out the bad music from nowadays because it is still nowadays. You ever look at a random man's top 10 singles list? The third one is a classic. The ninth is a song nobody remembers by a well-remembered band, and the rest are random pop songs except number 1, which was a novelty song popular for 3 weeks. You ever see a beautiful building from the 1800s and think, wow, houses back then were so much more beautiful and built better than today? That's because all the ugly and poorly built buildings from back then were torn down and made way for newer buildings. Whoa, I can't believe I never considered that. That being said, most modern architecture does use cheaper building materials, so it will be interesting to see what is still around in the 2200s. Famous people acting like they succeeded just because they worked harder than everyone else and not because of any factor of luck. All the people who worked really hard and still didn't become rock stars would be able to tell you that there's no guarantee of success, but they can tell you that because they aren't famous. The whole giving birth has happened for millions of years. It is a natural process and I don't need any medical interventions at all. For millions of years, women and babies have also been dying when giving birth. People do this with C-sections too. They think it's the easy way out. No, it's not. C-sections aren't new. The mother surviving the procedure is. You know that early 20s feeling where you don't know what you are doing with your life and have so much riding on your decisions to determine your success 20 years down the road. Yet you look back at your family and their friends and wonder how they all had their crap together and were functional, stable families. You don't understand how you are struggling so much on the edge of failure, but they were able to do it so easily with very little failure. Yeah, that bias. When people say that ancient civilizations, that is, Romans, Egyptians, were way better at construction than us, a large reason they think this is survivorship bias. You see the ruins of some structures but not the 99% of all other structures built that didn't last. Not to mention the fact that a lot of those structures, they had unlimited resources to build. Also, we now design things for a certain useful life. A lot of buildings are around 50 years. This is because it doesn't make sense for a business to invest resources for longer design life. The productivity cult. Not that productivity to a point can't be good, but people being pointed to probably aren't succeeding because they do those super productive things. They'd be successful anyway because of who they are. Wearing a single type of clothing to save time. Zuckerberg, for example, might help a bit, but he's successful because he had the smarts money to get into Yale and study CS. Wearing hoodies isn't going to take a guy with a community college education and make him a millionaire. People that won the lottery telling you to buy tickets because hey, it worked for them. They don't make them like they used to. Well, they do, and all the crappy old things broke a long time ago, so only the best quality remain. We find the tombs of kings, not the barns of peasants. Gaining wealth through the theory of attraction. Some particularly famous individuals, including Oprah Winfrey, believe that simply thinking about succeeding will bring the success desired in life. This is detailed in the book The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Only this is obviously flawed with survival bias. Of course you can say your wealth came from constantly focusing on success. If you're already successful, others in less fortunate circumstances who can imagine success in their head all they want but reap no benefits may disagree with this. When people say Saturday Night Live isn't as good as it used to be, it was always hit or miss. You just end up remembering the good skits. I've watched just about every season of SNL I could get my hands on, and it's been consistently hit or miss, if that makes sense. If I had to guess, for every great skit, there's 5 bad mess skits. Some episodes have been funnier than others, but there's no official peak, at least in my opinion. There's always gonna be good and bad cast members. There's always gonna be good or bad hosts. There's always gonna be good skits and cringy ones, and that's why I love it. Of course, it has to be the classic I know a guy who smoked a pack a day and lived to 95. Why do we need vaccines? Nobody dies of polio, smallpox, measles anymore. Why do we need NATO, the UN, or the EU? Europe doesn't get into large wars anymore. Nostalgia and memories. No one wants to remember all the crappy parts of their childhood or growing up, and we as humans specifically try to forget those moments. They don't make cars like they used to. That's a good thing. Older cars were metal death traps with little to no safety features. People have this skewed idea that older cars were built better. Truth is modern cars are faster, safer and a heck of a lot better for the environment. Using seatbelts significantly increases the risk of dying in cancer. Almost the entirety of our buoyant for life. Psychiatric and neuropsychological disability. We see people who are successfully managing psychiatric disabilities of varying severity and assume that everyone can be helped with enough resources and support. We don't see those who are too disabled to function in a community setting, even with extensive treatment. And many people are unaware of how many mentally ill people are incarcerated. This is problematic because it creates the illusion that adequate treatment options exist for everyone, allows blame for unmanaged disability to be shifted to the patient and their family, and prevents awareness of the need for greater funding for research and treatment. The Incel movement. The people who grow as a person and get to the point where they can get a girlfriend leave the scene, and everyone who remains is still spouting the same old crap. Medical anything. Appendicitis. Broken bones. Irritable bowel. Losing gaining weight. Pregnancy. My favorite. Cancer. When I had cancer my doctor said ABC and my naturopath said Z and I X. Y. X'd and I was fine. Yes, your mole removal really compares to stage 3 colon cancer. Breast cancer is the absolute worst for this. A small percentage of untreated cancer patients will spontaneously go into remission for no reason. If one of those uber lucky people, it's genetics or dumb luck. Most shark attacks occur in shallow water, near the shore. No crap, that's where people are. It's like saying most car accidents happen on roads. Sharks don't suddenly get docile when they're in deep water. I made enough working in the summer to pay for my college. I heard that from so many older family when I was in college and I said I needed to take out loans. You've been visited by swining thick boy. Like and comment swing well thick boy and you'll be blessed with many thick woofers in your life. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.